ኣኾኻይ ሕጊ ደፍውፃእ ደላይ ፍትሒ እቶ ኣኾኻይ ሕጊ ደፍውፃእ ሓላይ ህዝቢ እቶ ኣኾኻይ ሕጊ ደፍውፃእ ይኣከል እቶ ክምለስ ትሕቶ ክውቃዕ ሽቶ ክእለ ዘራጊቶ ዓብ ንእሽቶ ወፍሪ ጀሚሩ እቶ
It's nice to be with you.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much for taking your time to see me today.
Sure.
And I brought you the book.
Very
so
grateful. Thank you.
Let's start with that. So how do you feel? What's that the feelings you have, Robert?
Well, I'm delighted to have the book. I was very surprised that it had been translated into Tigray, and I'm very pleased because I hope it provides a wider audience for the work I did. How it happened is a bit of a mystery. People contacted me, said, would I mind if it's translated? I said no, and that's what I did.
Well, I remember a friend of mine contacted me when he saw it on YouTube and say, can you get me this copy of from Martin? I contact you and he say, well, I don't know where is it. And that's where I started. But finally, we got them. And thank you very much for helping Eritrean people translate it, because most of Eritrean people love to read in Tigray as well.
Sure. Well, I'm very pleased.
I hope we can get more books out of you. Maybe you can write the profile of Isaias Afwerki as well in the long term.
One day.
As you promised last time, yeah. So, well, thank you. Now is almost 60 years since Awata started. And Eritrea is still in the biggest crisis in the modern history of Africa. So what's the situation now you see in Eritrea and in Tigray? Because this is one of the problems we have now. And how do you compare it back into 61 when Awata started the war? Because those football just are made the memory of Awata, for example. This one is 61, which I have, and every football jersey has a number based on those people as well. And so this is one of the things. How do you see this celebrations in 60 years of Eritrean, the first weapon when fired against the Ethiopian?
Well, obviously it was a heroic attempt to create a better, free and democratic society. And unfortunately it is not succeeded. And one has to accept that. You know, the fact that Eritrea is now right at the bottom of the league in terms of human rights, in terms of freedom of speech, in terms of all the things which are promised, both in the UN Charter and in the African Union Constitution, none of them have been given to the people of Eritrea. And it's impossible to say that you have a liberation struggle for what? It hasn't produced the results that people wanted. Yes, Eritrea is an independent country, but quite frankly, you know, it's surely much more important is how people are living. What is the daily life of ordinary people? That is surely the biggest question.
Well, thank you for mentioning that. Eritrea is the failure of state. We know that. Eritrea has a famine based on my research, because 60% of Eritrean people live in farming. And today, no one is doing farming. Most of young people are in the military, fighting. And we have almost 1.8 million of Eritrea in farming. They need food as well in the next few months if this war continues as well. So the hospital system is in crisis. There is no COVID-19, as you know. So it's rejected. It was given by the Alibaba. It hasn't reached Eritrea. How do you describe these things?
I think the only way of looking at Eritrea now is a country which is in permanent crisis. There's a book which was written by a great British writer, George Orwell, called 1984. And at the end of it, the poor guy who is trapped in this terrible situation, he's being tortured, and he asks his torturer, what is the point of this? And he says, if you can imagine a human's face and a boot coming down on it for eternity, that's where we are. And I'm afraid that is almost the situation that Eritreans find themselves in now. it's one in which, as far as I can see, Isaias has no interest in the development or the welfare of the people. His only concern is absolute control, and the war that he has got Eritrea in Tigray, which I think he thought would be quick, and he had many reasons to believe that. After all, because you had the Ethiopians fighting the Tigrayans, you had the Eritreans, you had the Somalis.
It was the
drones, everything. So I mean, it was a huge operation. I mean, it was amazing that Tigrayans came back. And managed to succeed in resisting this. We still don't know what the outcome of that will be, but I mean, I hear that 50,000 young Eritreans have died as a result of this, maybe more. We don't know. It is a terrible
I'm glad you
situation.
mentioned that. Yeah, what we're hearing now is people are getting injured, more than 50,000 in the last 8 months. I don't know what happened in the last 2 months, but in the first war, when they started last November, and more than 50,000 Eritrean young people between 16 to 35 has been disabled from the war or that, and they were put in the hospital, and they didn't have enough treatment, and they put aside. They start dying now, and we hear that family was informed here in Europe a few days ago. The mom said, "We know our son is buried in Eritrea. How about the rest of them? Their mom is waiting for that." So I'm glad you mentioned this. So if the war continues, many young Eritreans will die as well in this war.
That's for sure. I mean, there's no way around it. And I mean, it is. What is this war about? I mean, it's almost impossible to work out why did they have this fighting. I mean, I'm not trying to say that the Tigrayans didn't make mistakes. They certainly did. But this war was plotted by Isaias and was plotted by Abiy for months before the war began. I mean, anybody who thinks it began on one day and it was a big surprise to the Ethiopian government, I mean, just hasn't been following what's going on.
Yes, I think I agree with you. This war was started many years ago. It didn't stop. It started in 1998, and many young people died, and we never stopped there. So now, after 2018, everything was in peace, but the border was open, and the border was closed.
Yeah.
What was the main reason for that? When the flight was open, the sea was open, the ports was open for the Ethiopian, but the border in Tigray was closed by the Eritrean regime. Should be something to investigate why. And he requested the refugee camp to be removed from there.
That's right.
What do you think he said that?
Well, because obviously he was worried. I think Isaias was worried about two things. The first, that he believed that young people were leaving the country, and he was losing his most talented and able people. And the other reason, I presume, was that he thought in due course the refugee camps would be used as training grounds from which people would come back and fight him.
Yes, I think...
and I think it was both of those things.
Yeah, I think you answered the right question, because now if you see the Mediterranean the flow is very low, the refugee flow, and the European
you can't
has
really
spent,
get across.
No, spend a lot of billions of pounds to support the Libyan Guard, so that's stopped. So Eritrean, they don't have nowhere to go except to go back to Eritrea. So this was the main reason the war started, and the first thing what they did is the regime in Eritrea, he went into the refugee camp and he started killing and taking refugees. They talk about 20,000 Eritrean refugees. We don't know where they are.
Well, I presume they were either told you join us, the military, you go back into the military to fight, or we take you back to Eritrea to go into jail or whatever. I don't know what's happened.
Especially in Shimbala, there were refugees from Kunama, the majority, because in their country, in their region, in Barca, they start doing the copper mining, Bishop. So they start moving from their country, they start removing them from their land, and they became a refugee in Tigray, and they become, one of them, he became actually a grandson. He was there for 20 years. And how do you see these people has to be protected, the Kunama people? They are the majority refugee in Shimbala, they were there.
Look, I can't answer that question. I mean, the real problem is they are now caught up in this war. I mean, there have been some claims of attacks by Tigrayans on some of the Eritreans who were in the refugee camps, which is very unfortunate. They need to be protected. But the worst suffering that people are having is when they go to Addis Ababa or to Gondar or somewhere, and they are finding themselves in a terrible situation because they now have to hide from the Eritrean security forces who are in Addis Ababa and from the Ethiopians, and they don't know who to trust.
Yeah,
it's a terrible situation.
I think this is one of the great points he brought up. I think he wanted them to be moved to Gondar area. So moving to Gondar is that the right hand there is the regime is Abiy, and Abiy is Isaiah. So why did you want to remove refugee from one place to other place in the same enemy?
Yeah.
So many Eritrean young people are appealing on you when you go to Al Jazeera, or if you get any chance to speak to those international, try to raise these questions and raise this point to the journalist. What can you do with the Eritrean refugee? Because they can't be moved to Gondar or to the central part of Ethiopia because this is the same regime.
Yeah.
And what we want them is, I've spoke to a few Kunama people in the last few weeks. They want their people to move to Sudan as an option.
No, that's a good point.
So, what do you advise Eritrean people to do that to push this instead of moving to the central part of Ethiopia? We want them to be removed. Our hope is this war will end and bring them back home. But if this war is going continuously, we have more than 60,000, probably about 80,000 Eritrean refugees in Tigray. I think Tigray has the main problem now, so I think 1.8 million is in the farming problem as well. So we can't balance these two things, but they are all in the same problem. So how do we Eritrean people need to help our people, especially our young people, refugee?
You know, I'm a journalist. I report on what I hear, and the best information I have. I'm not a policy person, so I'm afraid you're going to have to ask somebody else that policy.
Sure.
And I certainly wouldn't want people to risk their lives based on anything that I said, because I just don't know enough about the information of the choices that they have. Because it is obviously one choice for the UNHCR would be to try and relocate them to Sudan. Mm-hmm. But I wonder whether the Ethiopians would allow that. I don't know whether they would. I would be surprised if they would, because as you say, that they know what people are going to do when they leave. So I don't know. I'm not really the right person to ask.
Yes,
that.
Thank you. But I think this is the Eritrean young people's appealing. If you had any opportunity to speak to any international media to raise this issue, instead of moving into central part of Ethiopia, move them into outside of Ethiopia so they can be refugees, to be safe, their human right as well. So in terms of COVID-19, I think COVID-19 has hit us very hard, but Eritrea is one of the problems in COVID-19. There is many hospital system, or that many people are being taken out of Eritrea to be treated, but those people who doesn't have money, they still dying. This is one of the problems as well. We wanted you to get informed on this. This is what young people ask me as well, to the people. In terms of what's happening in Tigray, and we Eritrean, we've seen this for the last 30 years. Rape, killing, organ trafficking, for us is normal. This is not new for me, for example. This is what's happening.
I know. It happened in all sorts of places, including in the Sinai.
Yes, Sinai, and human trafficking started from Asmara. Organ trafficking was paid in Asmara as well. Some of them are in Europe as well. So what message would you send for the Tigrayan people? So this is a soldier, when you send him to fight, will be directed by the command. So he will be doing what the command has informed him or command him to do. So how do we bring this to society to live in the long term in peace and love as a neighbors?
I think the only thing we can look to are the institutions which already exist, and the main institutions are the church and the mosque. In the end, they have systems, and if they are allowed to operate freely, I think that they will be able to suggest to people ways of living with each other. I mean, I know that religion doesn't always lead to peace, but there is no reason to believe that it wouldn't lead to peace. It is certainly possible.
Yeah.
So I think that, in my view, the only institutions which are not completely dominated by the PFDJ or what was the EPLF are the church and the mosque, and those are the only ones you can really look to.
Sure. I'm glad you mentioned about the ELF and the PDFJ. So the countries, I mean, the regime in Eritrea is not a part of EPLF. EPLF doesn't exist since '94 when the veteran was killed. So the war is now commanded by PFDJ. So they should be responsible for the rape, for the killing of people in Tigray, not EPLF, because EPLF doesn't have any power anymore. Most of the leaders from EPLF, they are in prison for more than 20 years. So what would be your advice on this to differentiate between these two groups, between EPLF and...
Well, of course, there is continuity and discontinuity.
Yeah.
There are some that are in, and there's some that are and in jail, and there's some that are out and are running the situation. So, I mean, there is a continuity between the EPLF and the PFDJ, obviously.
But for me, I don't see any EPLF way of running the country for the last 30 years, especially since 2000, the war. After that, is PDFJ.
I leave that to you to comment on.
Sure, no, but that's the things in Eritrea, outside Eritrean diaspora. This is the main party which is leading.
I know.
And this is the party who take us to war as well. It's not the Eritrean people, because many Eritrean veterans from PLF, they are disabled, they are still in Asmara. They can't even vote. They don't even have any option to vote for if they will go for war, their son or grandkids. So this is one of the problems which I would love to highlight, because I've seen a lot of on social media saying the PLF is doing this, instead of saying the PLF, this is the regime, what it's doing.
No, of course, I accept that.
Yeah?
What you said.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So I'm going to have to go.
Yeah, we almost finished. So this is what happened. I think ELF one was established back in 1960, before I was born. They were started by two people in Cairo. They were both of them, Idris Osman Gardias, Mohammed Saleh Ahmed, and some other. These are the people who invented. But today, I think, as we speak, as you can see, the diaspora, it has many fragile groups, fragile parties. When the Eritrean ELF was established, which brought the freedom of Eritrea, this was the one thing. So what would be your advice seen from South Africa, apartheid, fighting against apartheid, and what would be for Eritrean people to take advice and look forward to solve the problem when these two people can build a new ELF, and now we're struggling to do that?
Well, I think the only thing that one can say is that it's sometimes a long struggle can be the right way forward, and to keep going and don't be disheartened. You know, because the many times it looked as if the apartheid government, which had many powerful external allies, it looked as if it would win.
Yeah.
But in the end, it didn't.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think one has to hold courage, keep going, don't be disheartened, don't be divided. Try and find unity wherever possible. Don't allow people to divide you, and don't allow the regime to infiltrate organizations and divide you. And that is what Isaias does all the time. And that is the one thing you have to guard against.
Okay. So in terms of the refugee, Eritrean people, the Eritrean diaspora, we haven't said anything. And the refugee was trapped in the war in Tigray. So what would be, because we saw the pro-government went out and do demonstration to take out the refugee out of Tigray to Rwanda, as we said. What do we need to do as Eritrean diaspora to save our young people? Do we need to reach the USR or United Nations or the UK government?
No, I think you need to organize yourselves.
Yeah.
I don't think this will be produced by anybody but Eritreans. In the end, the outside organizations will not help beyond what you have already achieved. They can be helpful, but it is only through unity, organization, and work that you will do it. Anyway, listen, thank you very much.
The last question, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I have to go.
The situation we have now in Eritrea and the neighbor countries, can the young Eritrean people take that opportunity to make a change in Eritrea?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah?
I mean, that
Because
is exactly what the ANC and the other organizations did from externally in South Africa.
Yeah.
You can work externally to change your own country. It's certainly possible.
Because this is the tip point for the two regimes.
Yeah.
If the Tigray wins, because when you try to kill people, you can't win against people. Now, young Eritrean in diaspora, they need to take opportunity to make their change in the country as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, Martin,
Okay.
thank you very much. Really appreciate
Pleasure.
it.
Nice to
really
meet
appreciate it for wearing your Sahel jersey, and I have Barca. This is what we're trying to bring all the regions as well. So thank you very much for taking your
It's a
time to
pleasure.
speak to me.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Martin.
Okay.
أخوخاي هجد فوصا دلاي فتحؤتو أخوخاي هجد فوصا حلاي هزبؤتو أخوخاي هجد فوصا يأكلأتو كملش تحتو كوقع شتو كألا زراقيتو عابن إشتو وفر جميرو أتوتو نعصو كخفتو نعمات خسنابتو لو تخقبرتتو أخوخاي هوي نبلي ندقاقف نسالي نتصواور نكاالي هاي نقدادع نتحلالي نسمامع نواهللي نقرارباي نفلالي ناملأنا زقودلي أبحادا نعسلي أخوخاي حادا نقول نتحواوشي سميرنا نقشقشي مدرغي مشي حبيرنا نقالشي طعوم زمن كملشي حرنة ديمقراسي أخوخاي اتسدت وردت اتمجوي تمأسرتي تمدفان معفان تشقرر مكرا تمشق اللب مسكال تبخيات أويات تسقطها أهتا تشرح قرحي تأكاجاج محجاج كل خبك تخون بلك أخوخاي يأكل حلنجي يبنقش زراجي بزي حدقي تتخل زنجي ينقس حقي برهاني خن صرقي أخوخاي هوي أزو صبق زي رأي قسلو زي حوي موائلو زت سقي حرنتو زت تشوي عدميو زت نكي بمجزاء تزبلي بلبو زبوهي قبو خينو فتح تدلي كالسعاب مبرك تفرف كمي أخوخاي هوي زي بلي كبانا فلي أيفالونا يفلي حق أجني فلت أبزن هلا نحنا نشوف القيتو زت فتلة هاجر تصدقا هبل بزين قلة وياني موي لكم كاب حق زلزلة تحت هاجراويان بميزان زت مزابلة أخوخاي أتات الدنا قفنا الملخة اللاقة حق طبير كامس حاسوت تحقب نورخ فيك اللخ عقب تتعيس أيخم كعقب سمك حخخ كابناي قليت مزقب مش هزب خايو زت مزت صقب هاجر مش ما مقد كيب لك هاقب أخوخاي بابور فتحت حمدبة تقير عقبة هاجراو ما أد قربت نخبب باب نوات بقنزب بقلبت كيدان نأتو قلبت محلايت ألا مني زبت تقع هزب مخاني عقابت أخوخاي نهاجراو تنشعي نوغنا زتو وتصعي قلاتي ناسو بقى كل زسمع زرقي يتصنبرو نزهاجراو قبقي نوه بيتروس كالداري